Sunday morning well underway here on BBC One, and that means it's over now. To Andrew Marr.
Almost every general election ends with an answer. This one brings us only questions. Can Theresa May now really command a government? What's going to happen to Brexit? And has Labour's left-wing adventure reached its climax, or is it only just beginning? Let's find out more. Fresh from one of the most remarkable campaigns in modern British history, though he didn't actually win, I'm joined by the Labour leader. This morning, Jeremy Corbyn is reported as believing that he can imminently become the next Prime Minister. Really? And as Theresa May lurks, wounded and alone in Downing Street, having sacrificed her key advisers, one loyal Cabinet Minister, Sir Michael Fallon, is here to defend the Prime Minister. But the biggest question remains Brexit and what this result means for the talks. I'll be speaking to that veteran Tory Remainer, Lord Heseltine, and reviewing the news, that hard-bitten newspaper hack, George Osborne, plus the staunchly pro-Theresa May Toby Young of The Spectator and from The Guardian, a fully re-educated Corbynista, Polly Toynbee. All that after the news read this morning by Ben Thompson.
Andrew, thank you. Good morning. The Democratic Unionist Party says it has had positive talks over a possible deal to support a Conservative minority government, but that no final agreement has yet been reached. Late last night, both the DUP and Downing Street released statements revealing that further discussions will take place later in the week. In a moment, we'll speak to our news correspondent John Campbell, who's in Belfast. But first, our political correspondent Leila Nathu is at Westminster. And Leila, confusion overnight. I suppose the question, is there or isn't there a deal?
Well, Ben, there absolutely is confusion over the status of this deal. Last night we heard from Downing Street that there had been an agreement on the principles of a deal for the DUP to support a Conservative government on a confidence and supply basis. So that would be to vote with the Conservatives on key parliamentary votes like the budget. Then we heard from the DUP, who said the talks have been positive, but they will still be ongoing next week. And then Downing Street issued a clarification that it was the case that the agreement was still being finalised. So I think where we are this morning is that the talks are very much in progress, but certainly the confusion surrounding the status of this deal adds the sense of Theresa May's vulnerability. Already we're hearing reports in the papers this morning that Boris Johnson is preparing to launch a leadership bid, though he has strongly denied that's the case. He said Theresa May has his 100% backing. And Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader, clearly thinking there is all to play for. He is saying, I can still be Prime Minister, and suggestions that Labour is preparing to vote down the Queen's speech. That will be the first big test for Theresa May's government if she manages to agree that deal with the DUP. Certainly a tricky time for her while this deal is still in motion.
Well, let's take you now to Belfast. John Campbell is there for us. And John, that's the view very much from Westminster. How's it being seen where you are?
Well, I was talking to some ordinary unionist voters on the streets of Belfast yesterday, and they were delighted. They think this gives the union greater power, greater force than it's had in a very long time. So as you might imagine, the flip side of that is that nationalists are concerned. Sinn Féin, which is the main nationalist party here, they issued a statement last night saying previous attempts by unionists to prop up Conservative governments have failed. They say, or perhaps hope, that this will be a transitory arrangement and one which could end in tears for the DUP. Interestingly, they've also said it's time for the Irish government to make its voice heard and, as they say, stand up for the rights of all citizens in Northern Ireland. And it's worth thinking about what the Good Friday Agreement says about the role of the British government in Northern Ireland. The Good Friday Agreement, which underpins all politics here. It says that the role of the government should be one of rigorous impartiality. But you might ask yourself, how can the government be rigorously impartial when it's completely dependent on the DUP for its existence? For example, cross-party talks aimed at reviving power sharing in Northern Ireland are due to get underway tomorrow. Up until now, a Conservative Secretary of State has chaired those talks, but how can he be an impartial chair if he's relying on the DUP, one of the participants in those talks?
John Campbell there in Belfast, Leila Nathu in Westminster. Thank you. In other news, Scotland Yard has released pictures of the fake suicide belts worn by the London Bridge attackers. The officer leading the investigation says it's the first time he's seen the tactic used in the UK. Last night, a week on from the attack, people visited bars and restaurants in the area in a show of unity and resilience, as Simon Jones reports.
Pictures released by the police show the fake explosive belts were actually made up of disposable water bottles covered in adhesive tape. But officers say they were designed to cause maximum fear, and people who confronted the attackers would have thought there was a real risk they could be caught in an explosion. As part of their investigation, police have spoken to 262 people from 19 different countries. 78 are described as significant witnesses. 3 people were killed as the attackers drove across London Bridge. 5 were stabbed to death in Borough Market. They were remembered last night. In a show of defiance, people flocked to the area's bars and restaurants.
Obviously, still reflect upon it and think about those people that happened to, but it doesn't stop me from coming out at all, no.
Can't not think about what happens, and was wondering about what the mood would be like, but it's really celebratory and fun.
We stick together, that's what we do, that's what London's all about.
In pubs, people are being encouraged to donate to the British Red Cross's fundraising drive to raise money for the victims of the London Bridge and Manchester attacks.
It's absolutely right that on the anniversary of what happened last weekend, the tragic events that happened last weekend, that Londoners can just go out and do what Londoners do.
Repairs are continuing to buildings damaged in the hunt for the killers, but the police cordons have now been lifted. Southwark Cathedral is reopening, an effort to bring back a sense of normality to an area that has experienced so much suffering. Simon Jones, BBC News.
You're up to date. The next news on BBC One is at 1 o'clock. Andrew, back to you.
Many thanks for that. And now, as ever, to the front pages of the papers. The Observer, I think it's safe to say, is very excited. They've got their editorial on the front page. Discredited, humiliated, diminished. Theresa May has lost credibility, etc. And there are splashes. May's premiership in peril. The Sunday Telegraph, a Conservative paper, isn't that much better for her. In office, but not in power, it says. A jibe famously used against John Major in the old days. The Sunday Times, 5 cabinet ministers urge Boris to topple May. And there he is, sniffing the air first thing in the morning, looking very excited. And the Mail on Sunday goes with that. Boris set to launch bid to be PM as May clings on. Now, Boris Johnson has replied to that in a word I probably can't use on a Sunday morning, but suffice it to say they're roughly spherical, and there are 2 of them. And then Sunday Express, again, another strongly Conservative paper. May's toxic aides resign. And finally, the Sunday Mirror has that big interview with Jeremy Corbyn, but it's also got the Top Gear crash, the hideous Top Gear crash, from which Richard Hammond walked away apparently virtually unscathed. His miracle escape, they call that. So let's start off, Toby, with the Boris Johnson story, all over the Mail on Sunday.
Yes, and I think that Boris's denial, using the word you just referred to, is plausible. I don't think Boris is preparing to launch a leadership bid. I think if he did so, it would damage him. It would look opportunistic.
He looks too cack-handed at this point, doesn't
it? I think within the Conservative Parliamentary Party, there seems to be a real appetite for doing what they can to support Theresa May and making sure she manages to stay on. Because if there was a leadership election within the Conservative Party, in all likelihood, there would be another general election, and the risk would be that Jeremy Corbyn, having done much better than expected in the last general election,
could actually win this one.
Could actually win it, and I think that no one in the Conservative Party wants to risk that, and most of them don't want to risk Brexit either. So I don't think there's going to be any leadership challenge for some time.
Well, you're a staunch Brexiteer. Is there a real worry that, looking at the arithmetic in the House of Commons, Brexit now can't be delivered, certainly in the form that Theresa May wanted to do it?
Well, it depends how closely the MPs in the House of Commons stick to their manifestos. I mean, let's not forget that more than 80% of the British population have just voted for 2 parties that want to take us out of the single market, out of the customs union, and want to end freedom of movement. There was some ambiguity when you talk to different
on the
Labour front benches. They
yeah.
often sung from different hymn sheets, but they've definitely said they want to end freedom of movement, and it's hard to see how you do that and remain in the single market. Only 11% of the British public actually voted for the pro-Remain parties, the SNP and the Lib Dems. So it doesn't seem to me that there is a mandate for a different kind of Brexit.
So no immediate coup, George Osborne, but there is blood in the water and everyone can smell it.
Oh yeah, I mean, Theresa May is a dead woman walking. It's just how long she's going to remain on death row, and I think we will know very. I think we will know very shortly. In other words, we could easily get to the middle of next week and it all collapses for her. Or if it doesn't, and I agree with Toby, there are many Tory MPs who don't want a leadership contest right now, it'll be delayed. But be in no doubt, look at this weekend. You've got the Leader of the Opposition coming on the programme as a sort of victor, and you've got the Prime Minister who's supposed to have won the election in hiding, and that speaks volumes about what's gone on in the election.
And is there a small part of you enjoying being a newspaper editor who thinks, I'm reading all these accounts in the newspapers of who's the runners and riders to become next Prime Minister? If a certain MP for Tatton, one George Osborne, had stayed in the House of Commons, it could have been me!
First of all, I feel well out of it, and I've really enjoyed editing the Evening Standard during the general election. And, you know, look, I've been reading stories about Boris Johnson running a leadership campaign for years. In fact, he's in a permanent leadership campaign, so I'm not sure it qualifies as news. I'm not sure as a newspaper man I would put it on the front cover of my newspaper.
You might be saying it was your London Evening Standard what won it, or at least what killed her off. Your paper has been pure poison against Theresa May. Been wonderful to read. Absolutely relished it with total joy. Day after day, attacks on Theresa May, and look at the result you've got. Now, what's so interesting to me about this? Why do you? I mean, I know she sacked you, but why do you hate her so much when she and Philip Hammond are following your economic policy down to the last minute? You know, 12 billion cuts of benefits, continuing cuts on health, education, and you know, let's look at reducing the size of the state in the Red Book, the same as yours, right down to 36% of GDP. They are Osborneites. So why do you hate them so much?
First of all, I don't hate them. And the Evening Standard, you know, will attack left and right. You know, it will do with. I think some of the other newspapers, frankly, have dug themselves into positions, whereas the Evening Standard, I hope people are reading it, can see that there are challenges both to what the Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party are saying, and challenges to what Theresa May and the Conservative Party are saying. And it's not that is. Sorry, I completely reject that. You read our editorials, you look at our news coverage.
I read them with delight.
I am speaking, and the paper is speaking for a very consistent view, which is Britain should be an open, optimistic country, outwards looking to the world. We should be socially liberal, pro-business, economically liberal. And that is the position I advocated in government, and it is the position I've advocated as a newspaper editor.
Amongst many Conservative activists, the view is that you have become the honourable member for Schadenfreude Central from the county of Embittertshire.
Well, that is, I'm sorry, you read the newspaper, and by the way, it recommended to its readers to vote Conservative. I think probably the only newspaper editor that went against probably what the majority of its readers were going to do.
With enormous
precisely because I think these questions have to be asked in Britain today. And, you know, I think there's a big role for the media in doing what the country needs, which is providing strong analysis, hard facts. And look, I am someone who spent years getting the Conservative Party back into office, winning in seats like Bath, like in Brighton, like in Oxford West. And I am angry, like many Conservatives are, that we have gone backwards, that we seem to be undoing the good work of the last 10 years. And I'm not going to be afraid to say that.
And you think that she's a dead woman walking. What did she say to you when she sacked you?
She said I needed to get to know my party better.
So she's got to know her party pretty well at the moment.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, there's lots of wonderful long reads in the papers today. Tim Shipman is probably the doyen of these kind of reports.
Well, look, I mean, I think Tim is the guy you go to find out at the moment on a Sunday morning, you know, what's been going on, who said what to whom. And also, I should point out that, you know, I'm a great fan of the political cartoon. I've brought a great cartoonist to the Evening Standard, reintroduced the cartoon into my paper with Christian Adams. But, of course, Gerald Scarfe is a fantastic cartoonist and has a rather, you know, graphic picture of poor old Mrs May and Jeremy Corbyn relieving himself on her. That's British, you know, that's the tradition of that is the tradition of Gilray in the 21st century. And then, you know, Tim has all the inside recriminations that have now erupted inside the campaign, and you can see the kind of what's left of the Mayites trying to blame Linton Crosby. Well, you know, I worked with Linton Crosby on the 2015 general election, a very successful campaign. And Linton Crosby, Mark Textor, you know, they are professionals. And the idea that they're responsible for Mrs May's failure to communicate or the disaster in the manifesto strikes me as, you know, trying to blame other people for your own mistakes.
Yes, and in the body of that, there's talk about the Boris Johnson machine starting to get going. As you say, it's always going. It's never not going.
It's a permanent leadership campaign, my friend Boris. Yeah.
But also some attacks on David Davis, who's perhaps a more plausible future leader. People saying he was responsible for calling this election. I mean, he tried to bully her, which I think is probably unfair.
Do you know, look, I have been in my adult life both an advisor and a frontline politician, and you can't just blame the advisors. In the end, the only person who decides to have a general election is the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
And the only person who decides what's in the manifesto ultimately is the Prime Minister. So, look, I'm all for, you know, making sure you've got the best team around you, and there have been some changes in Downing Street, and there's a very smart new Chief of Staff, Gavin Barwell, who is widely liked across the Conservative Party, including by me. Okay. But, you know, I thought it was interesting, Tim's piece, you know, ends up reminding us what happened when Charles I, and I'm a history graduate here, Charles I fired Strafford, thinking that this would keep the dogs at bay. It didn't. And so, you know,
back to death row.
I also would just point out this one thing. The thing that has really made the Tory party cross is when Theresa May returned to Downing Street and never mentioned the many good MPs who had lost their seats, like Nicola Blackwood or Chris Hopkins or Simon Kirby. You know, the Tory party, and I was watching it as a Conservative Party member, absolutely furious that there was no acknowledgement of the suffering and the loss that had been caused.
Absolutely. Polly, let's go to the Mirror interview with Jeremy Corbyn. A remarkable interview, actually, in many ways.
Indeed it is. I mean, there is a man who is supremely confident, delighted with the result. All around him are people, myself including, eating humble pie, who thought he could never do it. Well, of course, he hasn't done it. But the idea that there might be, and he plainly thinks there might be, an election, you know, within a year, within a short time, and, you know, one more quite small heave, he could be a number 10.
And he's suggesting putting down an alternative Queen's speech and actually defeating the Conservative Party in the House of Commons sort of quite soon, which seems to me on the numbers very, very hard to pull off.
I think that's very hard to pull off, and he needs to make a terrific anti-Queen speech, his own Queen's speech. But he has acquired a new confidence, and he swept through this election looking cheerful, in control. Campaigning is what he does best. Absolute opposite of May's glumbucket performance.
Toby Young's got a slightly different
I do find
perspective,
all this triumphalism on the part of Jeremy Corbyn and Labour does rather stick in my craw.
It does.
Let's not overlook, Polly, that Theresa May and the Conservatives got 13.7 million, which is a higher percentage of the popular vote and higher number of voters than Tony Blair got in his largest landslide. I mean, it's almost as if Tranmere Rovers were beaten 4-3 by Premier League team instead of losing, and now instead of losing 4-0, and now they're celebrating as if they've won the FA Cup.
We should say the electorate has grown in that period, so a lot of these numbers are a little bit dodgy, to say the least. It's a bigger electorate. Nevertheless, your point is well taken. Polly, I'd like to move straight on to the DUP story, which you've got in the Observer, because the really the big imminent news at the moment is about this deal with a small, I think 330,000 voters they had in total, and they are now going to have the whip hand over the British government.
Quite extraordinary that the Conservative Party is now in hock to the Orange Order. Most of them these DUP members belong to the Orange Order. Utterly disgraceful. But what's most disgraceful is that the Good Friday Agreement, which is lodged with the UN, commits the British government to be totally neutral. The Secretary of State for Northern Ireland is the arbiter, instead of which they are now in hock to one side. How are we ever going to put this back together again? What a short memory. How easily the troubles could be started again. How easily this could be unpicked. It is the most irresponsible bit of pure opportunism.
Talking about short memories, you're overlooking the fact that Gordon Brown in 2008, in order to get an anti-terror bill through, which increased the number of days you can detain terrorists without trial to 42, relied on the support of the DUP and made a deal with the DUP. So Labour hardly has clean hands.
Not in order to stay in power.
He would have had to leave.
Let me ask George Osborne. You spend a lot of time with David Cameron, quotes, detoxifying the Tory brand and taking the Conservatives in a more liberal direction. Are you concerned when you see them getting so close to a party that's got these very, very strong views on gay marriage, on women's rights, on abortion and other issues. Is this dangerous for
Well,
the
obviously,
Tories?
I reject all of those views personally, but the Tory party doesn't have any options. That's the only way it can get a parliamentary majority, because no other party will deal with them. It's different from the situation in 2010 when I was negotiating a coalition with David Cameron, where we had the Liberal Democrats as a partner. But there is a big difference between a coalition and a supply and confidence arrangement.
yes.
And let me explain, because
Well,
this was
we're gonna
something.
come on to that
Well,
with
very
other
briefly,
interviewers.
in 2010, we wanted a permanent arrangement that would secure a majority on everything we brought to Parliament. Supply and confidence means you're still basically at the whim on every vote of what the DUP decide to do. And a budget is not agreed by the DUP. All they'll agree to do is make sure that, the government ticks over every year, and you have to then go and negotiate every line item of the budget with them. So,
Tough stuff.
by the way, if they ever want to pull the confidence, they can do it and explain why. So it's a very unstable arrangement.
All right, we're running out of time. We need to talk about Ruth Davidson, because that's the other big source of potential instability.
Look, Ruth Davidson she's not a source of instability.
Well,
she is the
on Brexit, she might be.
She is the heroine in the party who, if she had not won seats in Scotland, with a much more open and optimistic conservatism than the National campaign was providing, then there would not be a Conservative government and Jeremy Corbyn would be in Downing Street. But the interesting thing about her is she is now flexing her muscles, and I think the most significant thing she's flexing her muscles on is Brexit.
Exactly.
And this article in the Sunday Telegraph draws our attention to the fact she has said she now wants to prioritise the economy and free trade over immigration in the negotiations around Brexit. By the way, I completely agree with her that that is the right approach. And if that's her view, I don't think there is a majority now in the House of Commons for the kind of hard Brexit that basically is a route to political ruin for the Tory party, but more importantly, is a real route to trouble for the country as a whole. And if the Ruth Davidsons of this world are starting to flex their muscles, that is, in my view, only a good thing.
Well, it's possible, as George says, that there isn't any longer a majority in the House of Commons for the type of Brexit that Theresa May wanted. But if that's the case, it'll be because MPs aren't doing what they said they were going to do about Brexit in their manifestos, because in both the Labour and the Conservative manifestos, they committed to ending freedom of movement. So I think it'll be very difficult for the Remainers to try and use this
There's one
as
very
licence
interesting point, which is
for rowing back
the
on
DUP and Brexit. The DUP need a deal, because they are absolutely committed, the DUP, not to have a hard border with the Republic of Ireland. So Theresa May's central claim, which is that no deal is better than a bad deal, becomes now undeliverable, because the DUP will never allow no deal.
But it was always part of Theresa May's strategy to try and secure
but now that claim that she can do no deal is blown apart, because there's not a parliamentary majority for no deal. Now the DUP has the whip hand.
This is completely fascinating. We're about to run out of time, however. We must mention Lord Heseltine has charged in, and he is now suggesting that the EU could offer Britain the kind of deal on immigration they wouldn't offer David Cameron, and we could therefore stay inside the EU.
I agree with a lot of what Michael says today, and I wish he were right on this. My understanding and my conversations with my colleagues in Europe, my former colleagues in Europe, I don't think they are going to offer this. What they will offer Britain, and I think what will now start to appear on the radar, is membership of the European Economic Area, a bit like Norway, and that is a sort of holding position, perhaps for a very long period of time, while Britain tries to work out what it wants out of the vote last year to leave the EU.
Polly, how long do you give Theresa May?
I don't think she can last a year. I think by the time we get to the Tory party conference, we're going to see a party in total disarray. We were all waiting for the Labour Party conference bloodbath. Now everything's reversed. It's the other way around.
Toby?
I think if she can do a deal with the DUP, even if it is just a confidence and supply arrangement, I can see her lasting until we actually exit the EU, because no one wants to be in the driving seat while the deal is done.
And I've asked George the same question already. Thank you all very much. Absolutely gripping stuff. So lots of questions for the EU negotiators as well. Guy Verhofstadt is the chief negotiator for the European Parliament. The Dutch MEP Sophie in 't Veld is his deputy, and she joins me now from Brussels. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Can I ask you, first of all, for all those people who think that Brexit is now in question, what is the view from Brussels? We've triggered Article 50. The clock is ticking. Brexit is going to happen, isn't it?
Well,
It is, I think. I mean, the Mrs. May has triggered the procedure. It has started. We have a period of 2 years with a possible extension of 1 year, but that would be complicated because that would require the unanimous consent of all 27 other member states. So, the EU has been ready to negotiate for some time now. We are waiting for the UK, and we hope that we can start on time and follow the timetable that has been set.
And again, all this loose talk about a hard Brexit or a soft Brexit. From the EU's point of view, you want to do a deal which ensures that Britain is in a worse position than now, and therefore you want a hard Brexit.
No, we don't want the UK to be in a worse position. We regret Brexit. I mean, I personally would have preferred the UK to remain on board, but the British people have voted, so now we have to deal with it. And I think we agree with Mrs. May on one thing: Brexit is Brexit. You cannot have your cake and eat it. Either you're a member of the EU or you're not. Yeah. At the same time, we will still have to work together. We will still be neighbours. We all have shared interests. So we do feel that whatever, hard Brexit, soft Brexit, that we need to negotiate, let's say, as friends and good neighbours. We're not enemies. We're not antagonists. We all have an interest in a good outcome of the negotiations.
Now, clearly, the British side is in some disarray because of the election campaign at the moment. Is there any way of buying more time for these talks?
Well, I think the treaties are very clear. There is a period of 2 years starting on the day that Article 50 is triggered. That was the 29th of March. So it will be the 29th of March 2019. And as I said, there is a provision that there can be a 1 year extension, but that requires unanimity. So that will be very difficult. But I think it's a bit early to start talking about extensions. I think it's time we all sit down and start the work. And I would really hope that clearly the elections didn't produce the outcome that Mrs. May expected. We just have to wait and see what kind of government will be formed. Whatever the government will be, I think as an outsider, of course, I cannot tell the British what to do, but we really, really hope for a government that can command a broad and stable majority, let's say that a kind of government that has national unity in order to negotiate a deal that's best for the UK and for the EU.
So in simple terms, what would happen if the British Parliament decided it didn't want to go ahead with Brexit?
Well, nobody knows really. That's uncharted territory. It's not really foreseen. But if the Brits were to reconsider, which I don't think that will happen. But were they to reconsider, I suppose we could talk. But still, membership of the EU. There's certain rules that you have to comply with, and that goes for any member of the European Union, and that still stands.
Absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us. And so to the weather. Wild times, wild weather, extraordinary drenching rain and high winds as we struggle to vote, and then bright sunshine, in parts of Britain at least, after the result. But let's not go all pathetic fallacy about it, shall we? I'm joined by Philip Avery in the BBC Weather Studio. Philip.
Andrew, what a build-up. Very good morning to you. Time for a little bit of quiet contemplation, perhaps. Well, that's the way it could have been this morning if you happen to be at East Sussex, and indeed quite widely across the eastern parts of Britain, but already signs of something a good deal more turbulent, as Andrew might put it, across Scotland and Northern Ireland. For here, the first signs of showers, because you're much closer to an area of low pressure, keeping the atmosphere very unstable indeed. And come this afternoon, we'll be at all surprised to see some thundery showers breaking out across the western side of Scotland, Northern Ireland too, maybe into the north of England. Further south and east, it's a drier and finer prospect, but watch out, the pollen levels are very high, and so indeed are the UV levels in some areas as well, especially across that southeastern quarter. Through this evening and overnight, that low pressure closes on the north of Britain, keeping the showers, if not longer spells of rain going. And a word to the wise, that's not the only effect of that particular system, because tomorrow morning, if you're commuting anywhere near the M8 and the central parts of Scotland, the wind gusts could be in excess of 40 miles an hour. That may cause you a few problems. Elsewhere, away from the showers of northern Scotland, the north of England, I think there'll be a lot of dry weather around. Hopefully hopefully some of this cloud will break up eventually and will push the temperatures to around about 20 or 21 at best. That's the future of British weather. For the rest, back to Andrew and his guests.
Thanks very much. Hats on all round. Now, we were talking earlier on about Lord Heseltine. He joins us now from Oxfordshire. Welcome, Lord Heseltine. You've written an article today in which you suggest that the EU could, because of the extraordinary circumstances, offer Britain a new deal on immigration, the kind of deal they didn't offer David Cameron, and that, in some respect, could keep us inside the EU. Would there not have to be a second referendum for that to happen?
It could be, but it could be another general election. But we're going to face another general election anyway in the context of the Brexit negotiations. And the problem now, put very simply, is that Brexit is the cancer gnawing at the heart of the Conservative Party. And there's a lot of talk of changing leader, may well come to that, but it's not about changing just the leader, it's changing the policy. And why I think it needs a period of contemplation by particularly the parliamentary party is to let them think through who and what is going to be the argument of the Conservative Party that will stop Jeremy Corbyn being Prime Minister in a couple of years' time. It's as serious as that. My own view, in contrast to the European spokesman, I heard talk about the need for stability and a united view with the British government. There is no stability, there is no united view, and there's not going to be in the present circumstances. We have a government which is at the mercy of events and of parliamentary votes. And the DUP arrangement, whether it comes or doesn't come, we don't know. It's certainly inherently unstable. I remember being in these situations before. Well, I'm closer to Ruth Davidson than I am to Arlene Foster, and I think that will apply to large numbers of the Conservative Party. It's just not a stable relationship. It may keep together for a short period of time. There are great weaknesses in the argument, but it might keep the government there for a bit. But I don't think actually that there's any mood for a new general election. Certainly not from the Conservatives, certainly not from the Scots Nats. And Corbyn can afford to wait. He can simply, he knows, we all know, that we're in for two things. A, an economy which is not going to improve in the immediate future. And secondly, the ongoing controversy of Brexit, which will reveal just how exposed the British government is in this negotiation. So he can wait. And in the end, by-elections will give him what he needs when the public mood will be clamouring for change.
You've seen prime ministers come and go, including female prime ministers in the past. How much longer do you think this prime minister has?
Well, actually, I think that's the sort of stuff that Fleet Street get preoccupied by.
Kind of important.
If I could advise, if I could advise Mrs. May, I would say that one great service you could do to this party is to allow the party the time to decide its future direction. Whether she would then revert to the views she held before the referendum or stick to the one she had after the referendum on Brexit, I can't tell you. But the fact is that if the Tory party doesn't lance the boil of Brexit, then you are opening the doors for Corbyn's premiership. I disagree with the... I disagree with the European spokesman saying that the process is underway. That's a sort of bureaucratic mumbo-jumbo.
Are you not just, if I may say so,
Europe are Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron. And if they were persuaded that there was a genuine British view about immigration that could meet their own experiences domestically, then I believe that the right leader of the Conservative Party could find a deal which would keep us within the European family, but deal with the issue of immigration, which is the underlying source of anxiety.
OK, so a lot of people will be listening to this and saying, there he goes again. It's an unreconciled Remainer rubbing his hands over the chaos and hoping that somehow, after a clear referendum result, we can reverse ferret. And actually, we can't.
You know, you've just described the Brexiteers over the last 30 years. They went on and on and on. And I think my democratic right is to do just what they did and to follow Nigel Farage's advice. When he thought he was going to lose the referendum, he said there'll have to be a second referendum. Nicola Sturgeon, having lost, was until the election, talking of a second referendum. It is Parliament that is sovereign in this country. They have the power, and there is nothing sacrosanct about saying a Labour government has won a mandate, we must all get on our knees and thank God. I spent my life fighting the decisions of the electorate electing Labour governments. In many cases we have won. It's a matter of personal integrity. It's a matter of national self-interest and sticking to your convictions.
Lord Heseltine, fascinating to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Now, listening to that, the Defence Secretary in what is still May's government, Sir Michael Fallon, that was a former Defence Secretary, of course.
Yeah, indeed.
Sir Michael, was it a mistake to call this election?
No, I think the Prime Minister was right to ask for a bigger majority to open up the Brexit negotiations and to build a stronger, fairer Britain beyond that. She didn't have an elected mandate herself. She wanted a bigger majority. That hasn't transpired, and now we have to get on and make the best of it.
And she is entirely responsible for this. She decided to call the election. She made it about her. She said it's me, me, me. Lots of the country said no, no, no. And as a result, we're in a position of chaos. Therefore, the whole process has been thoroughly irresponsible, has it not?
Well, hang on a moment. You know, we supported, the Cabinet supported her in that election campaign.
So it's your fault too?
Yes, we all take responsibility, of course. She's won the most seats, 56 seats more than Labour. She's won the biggest share of the vote for 34 years. It wasn't the big majority that she wanted, that we wanted. We now have to get on and make the best of it. There is no other party that has any legitimacy or credibility in forming the government. We will now form that government with the support of the DUP.
Do you believe you won this election?
Well, clearly what happened was we did not get the large majority we wanted, but we have the largest number of seats, and under our constitution, it is our duty now, in the national interest, to form a government. We are the only legitimate party to be able to do that, and we're going to do that.
Because you see, Theresa May said at the beginning of the campaign, if I lose just 6 seats, I will lose this election. How many seats did you lose?
Well, look, we did not get the majority in this election, of course, but we had most seats, we have the biggest share of the vote, and it now falls on us
But you
to
had a
carry
majority.
on. We had a majority,
and
sure.
now you don't.
Yes, of course, and we get the result of the election. We fully understand that, and we understand what the people are saying to us. However, the Queen's business must now be carried on. We have Brexit negotiations opening in just a few days' time. We have to continue to build a strong economy. It falls on us now to build a government in the national interest, and that is what we are working with our friends in the DUP to do.
Well, this election process has made the situation much, much worse. And it was partly because of the way the campaign was conducted. Did you feel during the campaign that the Prime Minister and other ministers were being a bit robotic, were not answering questions properly, were not engaging with the British people in a kind of vigorous conversation that we expected in election time?
Well, the Prime Minister travelled thousands of miles and took, far more...
It's what she did when she got there.
Well, she took far more questions from the public, actually, than Jeremy Corbyn did.
But she didn't answer them.
She tried. She certainly tried to answer them. She did the television interviews and so on. But look, yes, we understand the result. It was not the result we wanted, but now we have to get on and make the best of it, and that is the work that faces us this week, and that is the work we will complete.
You say you understand the result. So what changes as a result of that understanding? What do you do differently now?
Well, clearly, a minority government requires a different approach. You've already seen some changes in personnel in number 10 Downing Street.
Do you welcome that?
I welcome that, of course. It's going to require a different approach. We're going to see, I hope, more collective decision-making in the Cabinet. I and other senior colleagues have made that clear to her, and I think you will also see that she will want to work much more closely with the parliamentary party, both in the conduct of business and in the development of policy.
So can I be absolutely clear? You have said to the Prime Minister, and your colleagues have said to the Prime Minister, you want to return to traditional cabinet government rather than government by advisers, and you want much more listening to the 1922 committee of Tory backbenchers.
Well, I'm not going into the private conversations that I and other senior colleagues have had with the Prime Minister, but I think she absolutely understands that a minority government will require a different approach, a more collective approach, and she'll want to work very closely with the 1922 committee, with the backbenchers, as I said, not just on the conduct of business, but also on the development of new policy.
So the cabinet is back?
Well, the cabinet, we've always had cabinet government. We've had good cabinet discussions, but a minority government, as I've said, is going to require a different approach and an even more collective approach than we had.
How is the Prime Minister?
The Prime Minister obviously was, on Friday, I think you saw her, been up most of the night like the rest of us.
The reports that she was in floods of tears when the results came in.
I don't know about that, but clearly she'd been up most of the night on Thursday night. Don't forget, she's also, during the campaign, had to be Prime Minister. And I and other senior colleagues have had to deal with, we had the two terrorist attacks, we've had ongoing security issues. She's had to go on running the business of government as well as leading the campaign. So I hope she'll be catching up on some sleep now, but getting on with the work today of forming a new government and cementing that alliance with the DUP.
Well, let's come on to that directly. Are you trying to do a formal coalition with the DUP?
No, this is not a coalition. This is what is traditionally called a confidence and supply arrangement, whereby the DUP will support us on the big things like voting for the Queen's speech, on making sure the budget and the finance goes through. They support us on defence. On the big issues, they'll be supporting us.
George Osborne suggested it would be chaotic now because line by line by line they will be coming and arguing about things with you.
I think George is enjoying his job now as a commentator rather than a player on the pitch. We have to deal with the situation in the House of Commons that we have now. It's a minority government, but we'll be working extremely closely with the DUP. We've already started working on outline proposals so that we form a government with their support.
Can I ask you, have you got an agreement?
No, we're working on outline of proposals. It'd be pretty surprising if we had an agreement just in a single day.
Well, last night, when the BBC and the Press Association phoned Downing Street, we were told there was an agreement. We could go ahead and report there was an agreement. A few hours later, they confirmed that. A few hours later, again, they said, well, we're not sure. Then there was a long silence from the DUP. Midnight, there is no agreement. It already sounds, to coin a phrase, like a coalition of chaos.
No, come on. It would be very, very surprising if something as important and as complex as this was stitched together in a single day of talks in Belfast. Both sides have got to work through. But what we do have now is an understanding on the outline proposals that would underpin that working agreement.
This is a crucial agreement. Will the public get to see it? Will you publish that agreement?
Well, you'll see the outline proposals of the agreement, sure.
So it will be published?
Yes. Well, you'll see the proposal, which is they will support us on the
really
big issues.
Of, they will be asking for stuff as well. They will not do this for nothing. We need to know what they're going to ask from you and whether you're going to give it to them.
Well, they'll be making a statement too. They'll be explaining what their approach to these negotiations is as well. I'm not party to the negotiations, but they will be supporting us on the big issues, the big security and economic issues that face this country, and they will be helping us go into the Brexit negotiations and get the outcome that Britain wants.
So these are your new close friends. Are you repulsed by gay people?
Well, let's be very clear. Just because they're going to support us, they're agreeing to support us on the economic issues, the big economic and security issues facing this country, it doesn't mean that we now agree with all of their views. We don't.
And you don't agree with that one? I mean, I can
we
quote
don't agree with all
your
their
new
views.
colleague, Ian Paisley Jr. I am pretty repulsed by gays and lesbianism. I think it's wrong. I think that those people harm themselves and, without a care about it, harm society. I hate what they do. And on that issue, and on abortion and women's rights and so forth, you are now in an alliance with a party which is extremely socially conservative and very, very different from the Conservative Party that David Cameron and George Osborne were trying to fashion not so long ago.
We're not in government with the DUP. We're not in coalition with the DUP. They're going to support us, as I said, on the crucial economic and security issues that face this country. We do not agree, and we do not have to agree with any of their views on some of these social issues, and I certainly don't.
Crucial economic and security issues, you said. Another big issue, of course, is the Northern Ireland peace process. And into that peace process is written that the British government has to be a neutral arbiter between the two sides, that you have to be fair and in the middle. How can you be fair and in the middle if you're relying on one of those parties, the DUP, for your very existence?
Well, we've already had a friendship with the DUP that goes back many years before,
so you're not
before this
at all?
election. Well, we've already had a close relationship with the DUP. We have more in common with them than we do the other parties. But the DUP themselves want to return an executive to Northern Ireland. They have every interest in getting an agreement with the other Northern Ireland parties, and we'll continue to work on that to bring stability to Northern Ireland.
So they have very different views, not only on social issues, and we note that Ruth Davidson, for instance, tweeted that she had given a speech on gay marriage in Belfast immediately after this deal was announced. I wonder why she did that. There's a lot of people who are very, very worried in your party about their social views, even if you're not.
Well, we do not share their views on some of these social issues, and we don't have to share their views. We're not changing our policy on any of that. They are going to support us on the very big, Brexit, economic and security issues that face this country. It doesn't mean we then have to go and agree with some of the stuff that you've read out. We don't agree with that.
Well, let's carry on reading stuff out, or at least alluding to stuff, which is that you have been very, very strong in your views on Jeremy Corbyn and his connection with terrorism and all the rest of it. The DUP is supported by people like the Red Hand Commandos, the UVF. Do you regard those people as terrorists as well?
Well, the DUP has been part of the parliamentary process, part of the democratic process in Northern Ireland.
Ditto Sinn Féin.
In recent years. They've been part of the democratic process. They want a settlement in Northern Ireland. They supported the formation of the executive, and they want to see the executive back at Stormont governing Northern Ireland. So they're part of the democratic process now, whatever happened in the past.
Are you not slightly uneasy about their continuing links with those kind of groups?
Well, look, they are committed to stability and peace in Northern Ireland. They've been part of that negotiating process for many years now. They want to bring peace to Northern Ireland, and that will be something we'll be focusing on as well.
Now, one area where they definitely take a different view from the current government is over Brexit, over key aspects of Brexit. And it's not just them. Ruth Davidson, who has had a great victory in Scotland, 13 Conservative MPs now in Scotland, has made it absolutely clear that she wants, what she says, what's really clear is that the Conservative Party, having failed to win a majority, now needs to work with others. And that means we can look again at what we hope to achieve as we leave the European Union. Do you agree with that?
Well, first of all, the parties that wanted to frustrate Brexit, who don't accept the result of the referendum, were the SNP and to some extent the Liberal Democrats, and they didn't make any progress at the election. We want, as Ruth Davidson wants, a successful Brexit.
An open Brexit is her phrase.
A successful Brexit that is a new partnership with Europe, that is careful about the trade we already do with Europe, that comes to some agreement on the immigration that we can accept from Europe, and that enables us to continue to pursue new markets elsewhere.
Has there been a cabinet level discussion of any kind so far on slightly changing our view of Brexit?
No, the new cabinet obviously will meet early next week. Our view of Brexit, I don't think, has changed. We want a partnership with Europe. We want an agreement that maximises our access to the single market, comes to an arrangement on immigration, continues the security cooperation we already have with Europe. As I say, a successful Brexit, an agreement that is in the interests of us, but is also in the interests of Europe.
And do you think you've got a majority in the House of Commons for this now?
Well, I think we have a majority for that. Yes, I think everybody wants to see an agreement in the end that does respect what the British people voted for last year, make sure that our cooperation with Europe continues, our trade with Europe continues, our security cooperation with Europe continues.
But Philip Hammond, who was in line to be sacked had you got a big majority, has already spoken to the Prime Minister and said that he wants a slightly more pro-business approach in the Brexit negotiations. Things are already moving underneath the surface, aren't they?
I'm not sure you're party to Philip Hammond's conversation with the Prime Minister, and I certainly wasn't party to it.
But you wouldn't be surprised
We
by
want
that.
to work with business on this. It is very, very important that we're careful about the existing trade we do with Europe, about access to the single market in whatever new arrangement we come to. It's also important we don't lose the cooperation between our intelligence services, between our police forces, the security cooperation we have in Europe. As I've said, we want a new partnership with Europe, and we're going to be working hard for that.
David Davis, in the small hours of the election morning, before all the results were in, said this. He said, "We want to leave the customs union and the single market, but get access to them. That's what we put in front of the people. We'll see by tomorrow whether they've accepted that or not. That will be their decision." And by and large, they haven't accepted that.
Well, the parties that wanted to frustrate the decision decision of the British people last year, didn't make any progress. The SNP lost seats. The Liberal Democrats didn't make any progress at all.
Could you at least talk to the Labour Party, who are not, you don't list as one of the parties trying to frustrate Brexit and have taken a more nuanced approach in terms of getting a kind of grand coalition view representing sort of 84% in that case of the British electorate? Could you not talk to them and ensure that there is a joint position?
Well, I welcome the fact the Labour Party have shifted their view now and do not seem to be calling for a new referendum. And, you know, they, like us, I hope now, want to have a successful Brexit, and an agreement that works for us, that works for the European Union, that does not jeopardise the jobs and trade we do with Europe, but still implements the overall result of the referendum last year.
These are very uncertain times, and this is probably a very unfair question, but how long do you think Theresa May can last as Prime Minister?
Well, we have a duty now to form a government, to get on with the Brexit negotiations, which start in a few days' time, to continue the successful economic growth that we have. She is our elected leader, and I think you'll find the Parliamentary Party, when it meets in the early part of next week, the Parliamentary Party will rally behind her and give her support in what is now a different situation, a minority government, but working in harness with the DUP.
The former Chancellor of the Exchequer just described her as a dead woman walking.
I don't agree with that. She won, you know, the biggest share of the vote since I think the 1987 election. You know, for over 30 years. She did not achieve what we wanted, which was a bigger majority, but it is now her duty with us to form a government and to pilot this country through the Brexit negotiations.
Sir Michael Fallon, thanks very much for coming on when so many other people would not.
Thank you.
And coming up here at 10 o'clock on BBC One, Andrew Neil presents a special edition of the Sunday Politics with guests including Dominic Raab for the Conservatives, the Shadow Health Secretary John Ashworth and others. That's straight after this programme at 10 o'clock. Now, it was, by any standards, a remarkable campaign. But it leaves Labour many seats short of actually being able to put their policies into practice. What more can Jeremy Corbyn do to turn the effervescent politics of protest into the hard realities of power? He joins me now. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr Corbyn. You're looking very chipper, if I may say so.
Well, it's a nice Sunday morning.
Nice
and
Sunday.
what better place to spend it than with you?
That's very kind of you to say so. Now, you say in your interview in the Sunday Mirror today that you can be Prime Minister very shortly, and that you still expect to put down a Labour programme in the House of Commons. I just don't understand how that can happen, given the numbers.
Look, we have a chaotic situation with a government that sought re-election on the basis of wanting a bigger mandate and a bigger majority to bring stability to British politics. And what have we got? A minority government relying on the DUP to try and get business through the House of Commons when they have no agreed position, as far as I can work out, on most issues. It seems to me chaotic. And I think we are quite ready and able to put forward a serious programme which obviously has massive support in this country. Remember, this election campaign turned around a great deal on the basis of an awful lot of people rejecting the politics of fear and instead embracing the politics of hope that we can challenge austerity and we can actually start sharing the wealth out in this country a bit better.
But in terms of raw, brute numbers and the way the system works, they got more votes and they got more seats than you did. And if they can form a coalition or some kind of government, then they have the right to do that. And it's very hard to see how, with your numbers, you can stop them.
They are trying to form a government at the moment. I've no idea what they're going to put into the Queen's speech. No idea what their stance is going to be on a legislative programme. I'm very clear what our stance is. We fought this election campaign on a jobs-first Brexit. We fought this election campaign to oppose austerity. We fought this election campaign to start bringing fairness and justice, security for old people and real hope for young people. Surely the result has shown something very remarkable in British politics. Young people became engaged. Older people joined in that engagement. We had an incredible process here. There's something actually quite historic happened, you know.
It was an extraordinary campaign, but nonetheless, at the end of it, you lost the election. You accept that?
We didn't win the election.
OK, you didn't win it.
As you know, I'm a totally effervescent, totally optimistic person. We didn't win the election, but we had an incredibly good result, particularly, if I may say so, given the way that so many of our incredibly experienced commentators wrote us off a month ago.
So I'm going to return one more time
you're welcome to. Please do.
the
No
numbers,
problem.
the parliamentary numbers and so forth. You're going to put down, we read, an alternative Queen's speech. Is that true?
We're going to put down a substantial amendment to the Queen's speech, which will contain within it the main points of our manifesto. And so we'll invite the House to consider all the issues we put forward, which I've mentioned, jobs first Brexit, mentioned the issues of young people and of austerity, and of as many other things.
What are you going to be saying about Brexit?
Jobs first Brexit, and negotiate that as quickly as possible, but also to guarantee the rights of European Union nationals to remain in Britain. I think that will
do that immediately.
Immediately. Well, we already did that straight after the referendum last year on a, albeit non-binding, House of Commons majority vote, where the Conservatives, for the most part, abstained, but bizarrely, Boris Johnson supported the Labour vote on that occasion.
Keir Starmer, your European spokesman, said that it was an open question as to whether you would actually stay inside the single market and the customs union or leave it. Do you have any clear position about that?
Well, the position we have is that fundamentally it's protecting jobs and industry in Britain and maintaining that trading relationship. I've said this many times.
Absolutely. So my question is, could you stay inside the single market and the customs union?
Well, the single market is a requirement of EU membership, and since we won't be EU members, there will have to be an arrangement made. So
So you are clear, we are leaving the EU?
Absolutely. Where I frame it is that we want a tariff-free access to the European market. We also want to maintain very important university and research collaboration in Europe, and there's a whole host of European agencies, Euratom, security, environment, in which we obviously wish to be part of. And I tell you this, we will absolutely remain part of the European Convention on Human Rights and the European Court of Human Rights. We are not walking away from those vital post-war agreements that were made.
Do you intend to support the government on the so-called Great Repeal Bill?
The Great Repeal Bill, I suspect, has probably now become history. I suspect we'll have something different coming in a couple of weeks' time. We will put forward a position which we negotiate tariff-free access to the European market and legislate after that.
You could come quite close to dominating the House of Commons in numbers terms as well if you could persuade Sinn Féin to take their seat. Has it crossed your mind that they perhaps owe you a little bit? You could have a conversation with them and persuade them to come to Westminster.
I fully understand the many, many aspects of Irish history, and I find Irish history absolutely fascinating. And I have followed it, as you know, for a very long time, and I represent a constituency that has a huge Irish community within it. I don't see any possibility of Sinn Féin taking their seats.
No, none at all. Okay.
Well, unless you know something I don't know.
I don't. I'm asking you. But Ruth Davidson, who did very well for the Conservatives in Scotland, has opened up the idea of the main parties sitting down together and agreeing a joint position on Brexit. Is that something you would be open to?
Well, I don't think there is a joint position, because Theresa May and the Conservatives have said all along that they will go and have a talk to Europe. If they don't agree, then they're going to set up some kind of Singapore-style low-tax haven on the shores of Europe. Well, that's not on our agenda at all. We're putting forward a very clear view on the kind of relationship we want with Europe in the future. Where I do agree with Ruth Davidson, if I may say, where I do agree with Ruth Davidson, if I may say so, is that we have to challenge the social conservatism of the DUP and what price they are going to extract from Theresa May and the Conservatives in order to continue to support. They say there's no agreement. Well, the DUP have a very specific view on gay marriage, on women's rights, on a whole lot of things. They're not social liberals, you know.
They also have a very specific view about things like the winter fuel payments and some of the welfare issues, where they're on your side rather than the Conservative side. So we'll wait to see what happens. Presumably you would welcome the Conservatives not implementing those parts of the manifesto.
I've been all through this election campaign, and I've been asked 100 times the question, have we done deals with anybody? No. Are we forming a coalition? No. Will we put our programme to Parliament? Yes. And that is what we will do. That's why we fought the election. That's why we had the biggest increase in Labour support at any election since 1945. There's something quite remarkable happened there.
Do you think we may be facing another election this year?
I think it's quite possible. It's quite possible there'll be an election later this year or early next year, and that might be a good thing, because we cannot go on with a period of great instability. We have a programme, we have the support, and we are ready to fight another election campaign as soon as may be, because we want to be able to serve the people of this country on the agenda we put forward, which is transformative and has gained amazing levels of support because people say, hang on, why are my children worse off than we are? Why are my grandchildren going to be worse off than we are? It's about, this election wasn't just about Brexit. There was something very different about it. It was challenging an economic consensus which has impoverished so many people.
It certainly was, and there is now a big choice, in a sense, ahead of you, a strategic choice about how you lead the Labour Party going forward, because you now need to make one further big jump to actually achieve a parliamentary majority and govern as the Labour Party. On the one hand, you could say, I'm going to double down on what I've achieved so far. The momentum movement, getting all those younger voters out, giving them more left-of-centre manifesto, that all worked brilliantly for me, and that's how I'm going to carry on with the same sort of people around me as before. Or you could say, on this occasion, I want to open generously out to those people who gave me such a horrible time over the last 2 years, all those Blairites and Brownites who've been carping in the wings and are now eating humble pie all over the airwaves and saying how brilliant you are. Would you bring those kind of people back in? Yvette Cooper and all the rest. Are they welcomed back in the Labour Party?
I'm the most generous person in the world.
So the answer is yes.
Listen,
Chuka Ramuna, Yvette Cooper, they can come back in?
I'm not going to appoint a shadow cabinet on your programme if it's all right with you. You know,
I'm slightly disappointed.
I know you're disappointed, but we'll, you know, I'm sure we can come to an accommodation about this. Yes, of course we're going to reach out. Listen, I always have. Ever since I became leader, I've reached out, and there's been one or two difficulties at times in the Parliamentary Labour Party, but let's put that behind us. The issue is, the party came together around a brilliant manifesto, came together and fought this election, and came together for a result that you and nobody else ever expected. Out there, a lot of people said, hang on a minute, you are for the first time offering a real choice in British politics. And do you know what? It's infectious.
So what is the next stage of all of this? Because if you bring more people back in, you're going to, as it were, heal the Labour Party wounds and bring the Labour Party back together again after this election result. You're expecting an election quite soon. Is the Labour Party ready for an election again this year? It's a very expensive process.
Listen, we don't have any big donors. We don't have any billionaires. We raised millions of pounds from an average donation of £22. Ordinary people, without much money, saw in us something that was transformative, different, and a real offer in society. We're ready any time.
Now, you've probably heard already Conservatives on this programme saying the one thing we really fear is an early election because Jeremy Corbyn will become Prime Minister if we're not very, very careful. What's your message to Theresa May now?
Well, she fought the election on the basis she wanted a personal mandate. She said in terms in Parliament, vote for me. I never said that. I've said vote Labour. And she said she needed that mandate in order to negotiate Brexit. Well, what happened? She lost seats. She's now in a minority government. She's relying on the DUP, which barely gives her a majority vote in the House of Commons in order to survive. Listen, is it credible that with all the issues facing our country, all the issues of inequality, injustice, and the Brexit talks and everything else, that you have a government that cannot actually gain a majority in the House of Commons except by doing a deal with a very socially conservative DUP? Come on. We need something more responsible than that.
Is Jeremy Corbyn in this for the long term?
Look at me. I've got youth on my side.
Jeremy Corbyn, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. That's all from me this morning, but stay with us for more drama as we can now go straight to the Sunday politics with Andrew Neil, who is on the green at Westminster. I hope in the sunshine, Andrew.
Andrew, we are indeed in the sunshine. Welcome from the heart of sunny Westminster to a special edition of the Sunday Politics. After the shock of the general election result, Theresa May has spent the weekend attempting to steady the ship, maybe even just keep it afloat, reappointing key figures to the cabinet, sacking her two closest aides, Nick Timothy and Fiona Hill, after Conservative MPs demanded their removal in the aftermath of the Conservatives' failure to win an overall majority in the House of Commons. Over the next hour and a bit, we'll continue to take stock of the remarkable event